My name is Peter Clarke. I am a historical geographer, and my thesis back in the day in Trinity College Dublin was on the building of the Royal Canal. I'm a retired lecturer from TU Dublin. Now, the canal has a very long history because it went from 1789 to the present day, because in 1750 the powers that be in Dublin City, the government of the time, thought it was a great idea that if we copied England, where canal building was a huge enterprise and people travelled from one end of Britain to the other with fistfuls of money to invest in canals. And so they brought up a scheme that if for canals, one on the north side, one on the south side, if we build canals, make waterways navigable, two proposals were put forward, one on the south side and one on the north side. The one on the south side won, and so in 1856 work began on the Royal Canal, and the north side canal was forgotten for about 30 years. Then along came the same scheme again in 1789, looking to build canals, improve harbours, make rivers navigable. And two men came along, John Binns and his partner William Cope. Now, they were directors of the Grand Canal, and they put together a proposal to build a canal from Dublin City to end up on the River Shannon in Longford. John Binns was a silk merchant. He had his premises in Shaw Street in Dublin, and he was the main instigator of the Royal Canal. He gathered up £134,000, a fair sum of money in 1789, and he was going to get £66,000 from the government to put to it to build this big canal. Now, his proposal was a canal, an enormous canal. It went up through County Meath, it even touched County Cavan, all the way along to Westmeath and Longford to the River Shannon. And away they went in 1790. 2,000 men gathered on a May morning, ready to start building the canal with picks and shovels. The daily rate of payment was 10p a day. And we must record it one of the first strikes in the country, because by June they had down shovels and they would look for 1 and 6p a day. And the Royal Canal Company had no choice but to give them the 1 and 6. They were broken up into groups of 200 men, some heading down towards the River Liffey, others heading down to Broadstone, where they were going to build a harbour, and others building west towards the Shannon. They had an engineer, just one engineer. He was a part-time engineer, and just remember, this is one of the biggest projects, biggest civil engineering projects ever taken in this country, even by today's standard. The Royal Canal Company had a part-time engineer, Richard Evans. Now, Richard Evans was a young engineer, and he was working on the Grand Canal, and he was approached by John Binns and said, "I'm thinking of building a little canal. Would you like to take on a part-time job?" And very foolishly, Richard Evans said he would. Within 3 weeks, Richard Evans was sacked by the Grand Canal Company, and he now had a part-time job, and he had to take another part-time job on the Boyne navigation. And so the Royal Canal Company was going ahead without the assistance of a proper engineer on the job. Within a short space of time, they were absolutely broke. They had opened what is now the 5th lock, which they call the 4th lock, on November the 25th in 1891 to lay the foundation stone for the first lock on the canal. In 1961, the last boats docked, or if you want to call it, at Crossguns Bridge, and that was Willie Leach from Kalookan's boats. The boats are still out near Kalookan. You can see them there to the present day, the two barges. And in 1961, the canal was officially closed. Until 1974, when a group came along called the Royal Canal Amenities Group. And that's another story.
Hello, my name is Noel Spaine. For my sins, I am president of the Royal Canal Amenities Group. Now, Royal Canal Amenities Group, who are they? I'd like to tell you about them. Because when the Royal Canal closed, first of all to trading in 1951, then by the government in 1961, the canal lay derelict for 24 years. And because it lay derelict and no maintenance being done on it, it became simply a stream running through the countryside, an overgrown weed bed. And a gentleman living in the Castleknock area, Dr. Ian Batt, got concerned about his future, and he thought that he might like to see some form of restoration of this Royal Canal. He lived in Castleknock, as I say, and he got in touch with Inland Waterways Association of Ireland, and between them they agreed then that they would call a meeting in Castleknock Community School here in Dublin 15, and in doing that they decided that they would do a recce as the condition of the canal and looking towards the possible restoration of a section of the canal in the Blanchardstown Castleknock area. They decided the following Saturday to do a recce from the 12th lock at Castleknock to Clonsilla. They managed to get to the first bridge, Granite Bridge in Castleknock, pretty easy. The going after that got a bit tougher because of the overgrown state of the towpath, but they managed to get as far as Porterstown Bridge, Keener Bridge in Porterstown, and they could find themselves getting no further. So they transferred from the canal onto the railway line, and they walked from that on the railway line as far as Clonsilla, got their transport back to the 12th lock, and went to a pub that was there in those days, Donnelly's pub on near Talbot Bridge, and they decided to form a restoration group that they would call the Royal Canal Amenities Group. And that's how the start of the Royal Canal Amenities Group took place. They decided then they would start off voluntary work parties to clear away this overgrown towpath that was there. So every Saturday and Wednesdays they went out with their slash hooks and spades and shovels, and they started off clearing off this overgrowth of the canal. And in jig time they had it cleared right through to almost as far as Clonsilla in a matter of weeks. But then they realised that having done that, they get nowhere unless there was water in the canal. Now, as we know, the 12th lock was derelict. It could hold back no more water, so therefore you only had, as I said before, a stream running through the canal. And with the cooperation of Irish Rail now, COE in those days, they sabotaged the middle lock at the 12th lock and put it into what we call the breast lock, the top lock, and lo and behold, it held water, and then they were able to get water back onto the what we call the 12th level of the canal between Castleknock and Leixlip. Had a lot of fundraising events in those days, mainly in the Castleknock area. We had our annual cheese and wine in the parochial hall in Castleknock in the main street, and we had very high profile visitors taking place, including TDEs and Taoiseachs. They all came along because they realised that what aiming was for was quite achievable. The one great thing about Dr. Ian's Batt and the group's thinking was they wanted to restore the canal for the benefit of the community. He even got a boat donated by Bord Fáilte that they bought an outboard motor for and had weekend trips on the canal through the deep sinking that runs between Castleknock and Clonsilla. In jig time, a man called Eddie Slane joined the group, and he changed his outlook almost overnight by suggesting that they would clear the lock at Ashtown, and a group of us on a Saturday in Ashtown got ladders down into the chamber and took out all the rubbish from the lock gate, and in no time at all the membership doubled in the Royal Canal Amenities Group. You know, really astonishing results in no time. Eddie had the capability of fundraising to the event that he didn't have any problems hiring the likes of the National Concert Hall to have a concert in. 1,200 people took part as visitors for the likes of the Garda Band. It became a big event, so big that in no time at all we realised that we'd have to have a workshop of some description. So we built on the border of Dublin 15 and the County Kildare in Leixlip, and that was our workshop for the equipment that was needed for the restoration works itself. That is still standing this very day, not as a workshop unfortunately, as we call it, a boathouse. I don't know why we call it boathouse, there's no boats in it, right? But it's an achievement in itself. News of RCAG spread westward, and every town between Dublin, Leixlip, you had Maynooth, Enfield, where every town had a branch of the Royal Canal, all doing their voluntary work locally on the canal. And Dr. Ian and Eddie and Ruth Hurd, who was Secretary of the Inland Waterways Association of Ireland, went around giving talks on the possibility of full restoration of the canal. The deep sinking was the big problem today, because the actual canal lies about 30 foot, that would be 6 metres below the towpath, and the towpath is very, very narrow, it is, and it had been overgrown so badly that we actually built a raft, and we would go onto the raft with the shears and things, cutting back the overgrowth in it. In those days, we disposed of all that overgrowth by setting it on fire on the towpath. Not allowed nowadays. There were tragedies that probably relate to the actual canal itself more so than the amenity group. The amenity group itself, the tragedy I'm referring to would have been where a boat sank in 1845 at Porterstown Bridge with the loss of 16 lives. Now that's a story in itself. But we inherited a canal that was so bad. I'll show you what it was like now. Just look at that photograph there. There is down at Whitwood Road in Drumcondra. You'll see in the background the old Croke Park in the background, right? And that's what we inherited in 1974. We had voluntary groups coming out to clear out the looks that there, and they came out in their dozens, work parties in their dozens. It was a great social event it was. Another one of the same area, or even this one here, again in the Drumcondra, or down at the first level near Ballybock. That's what we inherited. It was a recognised dumping place, and it was up to us as a voluntary group to clear that out. We realised then that to get a complete job done, we'd have to install or replace the broken gates. So we set up an ANCO scheme, now called FOSS, and we were given the loan of premises in Watling Street belonging to Guinness Brewery, and we set up a lock gate manufacturing plant. They actually replaced 17 sets of locks between Dublin and Fairness Lock beyond Kilcock in Kildare. And each set of locks would have entailed, for the most part, two sets of gates at each lock. In the case of Ashtown and Blanchardstown, 3 sets of gates. And as well as that, to cap it off, they did 6 sets of locks for the branch line on the Grand Canal into Naas. The group had to raise the money and supply a foreman. FOSS provided the labour. I set government eyes open to the extent that they decided in 1986 to transfer ownership from CIE to then OPW. It wasn't actually transferred. It took years in which to do the legal work of boundaries and things before it was finally transferred in 1986. And from that on, restoration of the canal was undertaken by a government body, and now called Waterways of Ireland. And Waterways of Ireland and the Royal Canal Amenities Group worked hand in hand on programmes of restoration. People living in Dublin 15, I believe, don't even realise there's a canal here. And we have these functions ourselves even now, where the group, including our historian Peter Clarke, will do walks and talks. Enjoy the Royal Canal.
Jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal